Hi, welcome back. Module 4's Roundup. We're excited this week for two reasons. One, as we mentioned last week, artificial intelligence is one of our favorite topics, and there's a lot of implications there about the future, about society, and a lot of things that are really important to us. So hopefully it's been meaningful for you as you've gone through the module. But perhaps most importantly, we're here in Hong Kong. Dave Bishop and I are teaching a class this week related to FinTech, and we were kindly joined by some of our great students to join us in this week's Roundup to discuss some of the questions that you've shared for us. So maybe Dave, you can kick us off with our first question.
As always, we've loved the comments that you guys have had. Really appreciate you sending them out there. So some of the comments that you've had, we will kind of want to throw out to our class. They're from all over the world, really diverse group. And so the first comment that we had was about surveillance, and really relates to some of the AI things we've been talking about this week. We're constantly surveilled. There's cameras everywhere. There's ATMs on the street. So what do you think about that? Like, what are some of your thoughts? Is it a little bit scary? Is it better because it makes the world safer? Like, what are your perspectives on this in terms of the utilization of facial recognition and AI in our everyday lives?
Yeah, so I guess it depends where you're coming from in the world. If you're in the States, I think people will be really scared and kind of be against this. If you're from China, some views are that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to be scared of. But I think there's two main things. The first thing, if you're from the States in particular, is your rights, your freedom. Some people have been seen in the news that they try to cover their faces when they see a camera, and police officers actually force them to show their faces, which I think is not right, so to speak.
Yeah.
Another thing is these cameras in the public can be tampered with. I think they can be used as blackmail with police officers and law enforcement, for high-level, figures in the world. But there's also pros with having it as well.
Yeah.
So, public
you
safety.
Personally, how do you feel?
Personally, I think it's okay. I have nothing to hide. But I do feel that, because I am from both Hong Kong and the United States, that if I don't want to show my face in the camera, I shouldn't be, forced to.
Yeah.
But I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah, so for the class out there, what he's referencing is during our class here, we actually showed a video from London, of all places, which kind of surprised us, just from 3 weeks ago, where they had set up a police area outside on the street, and they were requiring everyone walking by to go through facial recognition software. And a gentleman didn't want that. He thought it was an invasion of his rights. So he pulled up his jacket over his face. He pulled his hat down. And the police actually used that as probable cause to detain and question him. And so it's kind of a catch-22, like lose-lose scenario. Either you let them scan your face against your will, or you run the risk of them kind of using that as probable cause in order to question you. So Cameron's saying that, generally speaking, not a big deal if they scan us and stuff, because it keeps us safer, nothing to hide. But if somebody wants to hide their face, you think that's, perhaps what they should be able to do. Is that fair? Okay, so Kate, what do you think? Because you're from Shanghai, from China, cameras everywhere. What is your take on this?
I still think that, I'm going to focus on intuitively, it's very scary, right? Everything you have that shows on surveillance and everything. But actually, surveillance happens in like hundreds years in different ways.
Yeah.
So I still think the technology, or say the tool, is not the centerpiece. The centerpiece is that we be mindful of this kind of risks, like Cameron just said, and to do the right thing.
Okay, so one twist on this question. I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts. What we haven't talked about in this course yet is the introduction of these types of surveillance with deep fakes. So some of the newer technologies, they are able to take anyone's face and then put another person's face on that video, and it looks extremely realistic. They're using this in Hollywood really extensively now, and the technology is getting cheaper and cheaper. So it's likely that certain people could potentially be framed for a crime or use these types of external surveillance, maybe against someone that they wanted to harm in some way. Does that give you any additional pause, or is this just something that's maybe something we can't do anything about?
I think it's inevitable that it will happen in some form or another. It's really up to governments and regulators to have tight controls on this sort of misuse of AI and so forth. But I have faith in governments around the world that they'll be able to control it and ensure that the usage is for the appropriate reasons.
Yeah, so our next question is about how do we regulate some of these technologies? So we're talking about artificial intelligence. Dave brought up this twist on that previous question about deep fakes. And how do we regulate these? There's different countries in the world, different jurisdictions.
Diverse group here.
A diverse group here, and people have different opinions on this. So will there ever come a time when perhaps we can have a uniform rule or regulation that will cover this globally? Is that something that practically that could be difficult, but is that something we aspire to do? So maybe we start with that question, because it's quite important as a fundamental starting point in how we think about perhaps regulating some of these technologies. So do any of you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I guess, a lot of companies nowadays, how they operate is not really restricted to a physical space. I think back in the days, you think about the retail shop, then it's confined into a physical space. Let's say if a shop is operating in New York, then they follow New York law. And then if they're operating in California, they follow California law. But let's say, nowadays everyone's shopping in Amazon, everyone's shopping in different, online websites. And, at least in the States, the bar exam and then the law is kind of, specific to each state. And then if some sort of a crime, some sort of, incident that happens, what jurisdiction's law do we go by? And then if we go beyond that, one country, we buy things from, I buy things from, the UK, I buy things from, Hong Kong, then who are the lawmakers or the regulators to really regulate what law to follow or what guideline to follow? And when there's some inter-country incident happening, which guideline is the the golden rule to dictate? So I guess
it's really complicated. Yeah.
So do you think there should be a universal law at some point? Would that be the best way to deal with this, or can we rely on law as kind of the way we deal with this, or are there other mechanisms perhaps that we should think about?
Maybe we need
society?
a supreme AI overlord who can just determine all those things for us, maybe.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't have an answer to this. I guess,
Do you think that it's even feasible that there will be global standards?
So, yeah. For instance, it should be very complicated. Like even for nuclear weapons, we not all agree about it. So how it's going to work for FinTech or AI? It's going to be very complicated, I guess.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of money involved, though, and so you will see that typically where money is involved and where cross-border commerce is involved, those are the rules that are typically the most uniform. So I think the best example would be intellectual property, and you have really large kind of multinational organizations like the WTO or other global bodies that kind of force companies into obeying certain rules. Do you think that the EU and the US and China perhaps would be powerful enough at some point to kind of force everybody into adopting, because you don't have to convince everybody, you just need to convince a couple core powers. Maybe that could be plausible?
It's complicated nowadays. When you see already the trade war, China versus US, who's gonna take over? Who's gonna decide? This is a good question.
Yeah.
So I think the MiFID II example is quite interesting, actually. So Jenna was talking about the PII, so personal identifiable information, and because that actually ties directly into this idea of artificial intelligence, the data that's there.
Yeah.
Because would that qualify as PII?
Yeah.
So that actually becomes quite an interesting question to think about, because if it does, then it would fall automatically under an existing regulation.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then why not? Because we could say our birth date, address, national identity number, is personally identifiable information, but clearly our face should be a form of PII too, right? And so it does raise some interesting questions.
Yeah, and I do think it also gives me some hope that there is the potential for more uniform guidelines going forward, because if you think of capital markets, right, there's a lot of uniformity, because if you have a foreign or overseas company that's listed in, say, on a U.S. stock exchange, then they have to adopt some of those rules. Contract rules are fairly uniform. Again, intellectual property, product liability rules, or even development and production of products. So basically, if these countries do want to do business back and forth in AI and information technology and stuff is going to be more cross-border in nature. And so I think it is actually very plausible that there will be some type of standards going forward. I guess the question is who's going to be able to push those things and enforce them, right? Enforceability is always, I think, the biggest challenge when you're dealing with like cross-border things. Yeah.
There's different definitions of PII. There's no single definition of PII.
Right. Currently.
So I mean, one country can impose like 30 different fields as PII, but another country may think that that's not invasive. So who's the authority to say what's the right level of control? What are true PII, if there's such thing? And what are some bogus PII? Like, don't know.
Yeah, and this actually is a good tangent to our third kind of topic, because one of the topics that students were commenting on was really about authority and power, and specifically in terms of introducing AI in order to reduce human bias, but unfortunately the data that creates a lot of AI data sets is already biased, and so potentially could re-entrench existing bias. And so I'm just curious from your perspective, so some of the things we've talked about include like mortgages that are built off of perhaps biased racist data, then create AI systems where the computer then decides to give worse loan terms to a minority, let's say. Kenny has a technology background. Do you think that introducing artificial intelligence, machine learning, and these kind of amoral, non-human actors is going to increase like a more fair and transparent system? Or is the data so tainted that it's only going to entrench these human biases and kind of make even worse outcomes for some people?
From the technology point of view, as we know, the AI model is actually coming from you need to feed in a lot of data, okay? And those data are based on the past history. For example, from a bank, the mortgage approval history transaction. So if there is some bias, okay, in the very first place, for example, the approval manager keep rejecting a mortgage application because of the race, because of the background, then those data will actually fit into the model, and then the model will have the bias. And then, but the thing is, in the ethical point of view, whether the bank or the government would like to change this kind of bias. Okay, so this is quite hard to say whether, okay, this is fine, we are used to do this, this is what we expected, the result, or this is not good, we need to change it. I guess it depends on the bank or the government, how they treat this as to make it a fair judgment.
Okay, great. And as someone who's, again, in technology, do you think that there are things that we can do now to hopefully ensure a more transparent and ethical system?
Of course, I believe the government has to take the lead, okay, to educate the banks, the organization who use AI. They have to promote, okay, the fair use or the ethical side of AI, using AI. And then regulation also, you from different point of view, like discrimination, racism, different kind of the aspects, they have to set very clear direction and regulations. But it takes time to do that.
What can we do? Let's assume, I think everybody that is thinking about these AI type of issues, about data bias and things like that, I think we all understand that the basic issue in terms of if you get bad data in, bad outcomes potentially. But let's say that happens though, unintentionally. What is the process to address that? Okay, Carl,
So in fact, the good first thing is to be able to realize, thanks to AI, that we are doing things wrong, in the wrong way. So we are making mistakes, and to recognize those mistakes. And then we're gonna be able to build on that. And then to recognize that with ethic, we're gonna be able to build the right model, not to have discrimination against about gender, about racism or whatever. I think it's a good point. And to bring new data and to build a model which gonna make the world, the world a better place.
There you go. The typical Silicon Valley mantra. Okay, so kind of concluding thoughts. Give us like one or two lines of why maybe you're excited about AI and its potential for the future. Do you want to give us an idea? What is it about AI that kind of excites you from a FinTech standpoint?
From a FinTech standpoint, we think it's actually making our life better. in many ways, like the payment system has been changing a lot over the past few years. But to a certain extent, I found that with the AI, there are a lot of data sharing issues, privacy issues that also arise at the same time. So there is always to be a balance between the AI usage as well as how it should be used in an ethical way.
So based on what we've discussed already, I think one of the most powerful aspects of FinTech is the inclusivity it brings to people, and especially people who don't have access to traditional financial services. And that's one of the biggest benefits. I come from an emerging market, Bangladesh, and we talked about that at length in this course, how FinTech has brought so much access to financial services to the unbanked. And I think that's one of the greatest potentials. For all the risks such as bias and other things that marginalize people, there's a huge positive to FinTech that actually brings people access to financial services to improve their quality of life.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've always thought of Bangladesh as a good example because, University of Hong Kong, we've got a great university, and yet no Nobel Prize laureates. And yet University of Dhaka, also a great university, but I think two. And a lot of times the most, I guess, beneficial technologies happen in emerging markets because it's really just out of necessity. Right? So if you think of Muhammad Yunus, he's very explicit. He's like, I wasn't trying to invent microfinance. I was just trying to serve the needs of a lot of people. And so I think for me, again, I love the developing space as well. And I think some of the most interesting utilizations of these technologies are really in that space because the potential impact is just astronomical. It's really cool. Yeah.
And that's also brilliant in the sense of going back to the topic of eliminating bias in AI, because what, David, you were talking about, the bottom of the pyramid, they're collecting data from the bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah.
They're not collecting only biased data from rich people or privileged people. So that data is going to be incredibly powerful towards contributing to less biased AI.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm not sure if this is what you meant, but there has not been data collected on them in this way before, which means it's completely untainted, hopefully, if it's done properly. And so you just got a clean slate, move forward. Yeah, great. And any other kind of final comments that anybody has for excitement about AI?
I think not only fintech, but the technology in general now have a lot of drive a lot of attention. So there is a lot of discussion, just like what we do today. Actually, is a positive element to revisit the ethic and the risk, and also the current system. What is the issue with the current system? Why the current system is, for example, the financial system didn't serve some people?
Yeah.
Where is the gap? And then challenge the business as usual actually can have a lot of potential to add a lot of value to the economy and also other aspects.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we really appreciate our students for joining us in this roundup. We really wish all of you in our online course, we could actually meet with you in this kind of setting and capacity and kind of engaging these ideas. Hopefully we'll be able to continue to do this in some ways further moving on. And we really look forward to connecting again after Module 5, which is really important as well as we revisit some of these questions in a broader structural sense.
Yep. Talk to you next week.
Thank you.